I remember the first time I wandered deep into the forest alone. The sky was a dull gray, the fog curling around the trunks like smoke from some unseen fire. Every step on the damp earth made a soft, sucking sound, and the silence around me was so complete, it felt alive. I could hear my own heartbeat, slow and measured, and the faint rustle of leaves in the distance. A pale light flickered through the trees, maybe a reflection of something or someone, but it moved differently than it should. It didn't belong. I thought I was imagining it at first. The further I walked, the colder it felt, and the whisper of wind seemed almost like voices, half-formed, calling me by name. And then I saw the trail split into two paths, one leading deeper into shadow, the other fading into the unknown. I hesitated, and that's when I saw it. It was early evening when I found the clearing. A soft wind moved through the pines, their needles brushing together like quiet voices. The air smelled of rain and wood smoke. The ground was damp beneath my boots, moss spreading thick between roots. I set my tent near an old cabin, its roof half fallen, its windows swallowed by vines. The place felt forgotten, but not empty. I tried not to think about that. The fog rolled in slow, hugging the trees until the forest became a pale, shifting wall. Each breath I took seemed to echo, too loud, too alone. I built a small fire, watched the smoke curl upward and vanish into the mist. The woods were still, so still I could hear the soft crack of each ember, the small sigh of my own breath, and then a whisper, so faint I almost mistook it for wind. It drifted between the trees, carried low, as if someone was standing just beyond the fog. I froze. The whisper stopped. Only the fire moved now, light flickering against the cabin's wall. My hands were shaking. I told myself it was nothing. The forest has a way of speaking, in branches and breeze. Still, I couldn't stop listening. When I finally crawled into my tent, the air felt heavier, like something waiting outside for me to close my eyes. Sleep came slow. Dreams came slower. At some point, I woke. The fire had gone out. The night was thick with fog, so dense it pressed against the fabric of my tent. And there, from just beyond it, a sound. Scratching, soft, careful, moving around me in a slow circle. I held my breath. The scratching stopped, then a whisper again, clearer now. It said nothing I could understand. Just syllables that felt like my name spoken backward. The tent trembled once, then silence. I waited until the first gray light cut through the mist. When I finally unzipped the flap, the forest looked ordinary again, still damp, almost harmless, almost. I stepped out, stretching stiff legs, trying to laugh it off. That's when I saw them. On the bark of every tree around the clearing, marks, carved clean and deep, spiraling symbols I didn't recognize. They weren't there yesterday. I was sure of it. I ran my hand along one of the carvings. The wood was cold, slick like skin under morning dew. Something pulsed beneath it, a faint vibration like a hum trapped inside. I stepped back. The air had changed. Too quiet again, even the birds refused to move. The cabin door creaked open just a little, though I hadn't touched it. A thread of fog slipped from inside, curling toward my feet. It smelled old, like wet stone and rust. I packed my things fast, hands fumbling, heart unsteady. But even as I worked, I felt eyes on me. Not close. Not far, just watching. When I turned, there was nothing. Only the fog, breathing between the trees. As I left the clearing, the whisper came one last time. It followed the rhythm of the wind, soft, patient, as if saying goodbye. But when I reached the trail, I realized something. The carvings on the trees had changed direction. Now they faced the path I'd taken to leave, like they were watching me go. The forest behind me stayed silent, yet the echo of that whisper still moved beneath the pines, waiting for someone else to listen. I found it near the ridge trail, half buried in fog where the air smelled faintly of iron and pine. The day had been long. The forest felt heavier than usual, branches hanging low, the kind of silence that bends your thoughts inward. Then I saw the light, a faint, yellow shimmer hovering between the trees. At first, I thought it was a trick, the sun breaking through mist, or maybe a reflection from my headlamp. But the sun had already fallen, and I wasn't wearing a light. It hung there, suspended in the air, a small lantern, old and rusted, swaying gently, though there was no wind. The glass was cracked, its metal frame covered in moss. Still, the flame inside flickered steady, burning without smoke, without heat. I watched it from a distance. Something about it pulled at me. Each sway seemed deliberate, like it was breathing or beckoning. The shadows stretched long across the ground, curling toward my boots as if reaching. The fog around me thickened, and a low humming began. Soft at first, like a faraway choir, then deeper. Vibrating through my chest, it wasn't coming from the trees. It came from the lantern. The closer I stepped, the louder it grew. Not a sound I could describe. More like the forest itself was resonating. The flame pulsed once, then steadied, as if waiting. I whispered into the air, asking if someone was there. No reply, just the hum, slow, rhythmic, alive. The lantern drifted slightly to the left, then to the right, as though circling me. Every instinct told me to leave. But I didn't. I reached out my hand. The air around it felt colder, like stepping into water. The flame leaned closer, as if drawn to my fingers. It flickered fast, then froze mid-sway. For one heartbeat, everything was still. Then it vanished. No spark, no smoke, no sound. Just emptiness. The forest fell silent again, too sudden, too complete. I stared at the space where it had been. Only darkness remained. But on the ground, fresh tracks, boot prints, not mine. They circled the spot where the lantern had hovered and led deeper into the fog. I followed without meaning to, feet moving quiet on wet leaves. The humming returned, faint, like an echo inside my skull. It guided me through the dark, a compass of sound and breath. The footprints grew lighter, then disappeared completely. When I stopped, I realized I'd wandered into a clearing I didn't recognize. The air smelled of burnt oil, and hanging from a low branch above me was another lantern, identical. Its light was dimmer, barely alive, as though waiting for me to come closer again. I didn't move. This time I just watched. The flame flickered once, twice, then bent, forming a shape against the glass, a face, pale, blurred by the fog inside it. Eyes like faint circles of smoke. It blinked slowly, as if noticing me for the first time. Then the glass cracked. A hairline fractured, traced across it like a vein of lightning. The humming rose sharply, too loud now, vibrating the trees. I stepped back, heart hammering, and the lantern swung once. Hard, as though pushed by unseen hands, its chain snapped. The lantern fell, hit the ground, and shattered. The light didn't die. It spilled out, a pool of pale glow that crawled toward my boots and faded into the dirt. When it was gone, so was the sound. The forest exhaled. Fog drifted back between the trees, soft and endless. I walked until I found the path again. The world felt normal, almost, but every few steps I caught a faint flicker from the corner of my eye. Not fire, not reflection, just the echo of that lantern, still hanging somewhere in the dark, waiting to be found again. And sometimes, when the wind goes still, I think I can hear it hum. The forest path was quiet that evening. Too quiet. The sun had slipped low behind the hills, turning the sky a dull silver. Mist gathered where the trail curved. I walked slowly, boots sinking into damp earth. The smell of pine and soil clung to the air. Everything felt distant, like the world was holding its breath. Then I heard it, a single step. Behind me I stopped. So did the sound. The trees stood still, their shadows long and thin across the path. I waited, listening. Nothing. Just my heartbeat and the faint rustle of leaves. I told myself it was an echo, a branch, maybe. But when I started walking again, it started too, step for step. Slow, deliberate. When I quickened my pace, it did the same. When I stopped, it stopped. The rhythm was perfect. Too perfect to be chance. I turned, expecting to see someone on the trail, but the path was empty, only fog, and the faint outline of my own footprints fading behind me. A cold wind passed through the trees. The pine needles whispered. I tried calling out. My voice sounded strange, small, like it didn't belong here. No reply came back. Only silence. I began walking again, faster now, eyes flicking from side to side. The footsteps returned, closer this time. Not loud, but clear enough to feel through the ground. Something shifted in my peripheral vision, a shadow that moved when I didn't. I turned quickly. Nothing there. The fog pressed tighter, curling low across the ground. Each breath came out pale, as if the cold had thickened. I told myself to stay calm. Keep walking. Don't look back. But curiosity is a quiet poison. At the next bend, I stopped once more. Suddenly, without warning, and from behind me. 2 more steps, late, out of sync. Someone was there. I could feel it now, that heavy awareness, like eyes tracing the back of my neck. I didn't turn right away. I let the silence stretch, long enough to hear the forest breathe again. Then slowly, I turned my head. The trail was empty. But the fog seemed thicker in one spot, a darker patch that pulsed slightly, as if something inside it was waiting to form. I took 1 step toward it. The shape dissolved instantly, like mist retreating from light, and the footsteps stopped. I stood there until dusk slipped into night. Every sound felt wrong. Too close, too human. When I finally started walking again, I made sure to listen carefully. No echo this time, just the sound of my own breathing. But as I reached the clearing ahead, I looked down. Beside my own footprints was another set, lighter, narrower, pressed perfectly beside each step I'd taken. They ended exactly where I stood. And as the last light faded from the trees, I thought I heard a whisper just behind me, a breath that almost laughed. Then, nothing, only fog and silence. The trail curved into a hollow valley, where the fog sat thick and unmoving. That's where I saw it. A campsite left behind. At first it looked ordinary. A few tents half collapsed, a metal kettle rusting in the grass, a torn sleeping bag soaked through with dew. But something about the air felt wrong. Too still. Too aware, I called out softly. No answer. Even the echo refused to return. The fire pit was cold, but the ash inside was recent, gray, not black. Someone had been here. Not long ago, a chill crept up my arms. The smell of damp fabric mixed with something faintly sweet, like wet pine and old fruit left to rot. I stepped closer to one of the tents. The zipper hung open halfway, flapping slightly in the breeze that didn't exist. Inside, a few clothes, a mug still half full of rainwater, a journal turned face down. I bent to pick it up, but before I could, something shifted in the corner of my eye. The kettle. It had moved, only an inch, but I knew it had been closer to the fire pit before. I froze, waiting for the forest to breathe again. It didn't. I stood there, listening to the silence until it pressed against my ears. Then I turned back toward the tent, and the mug was gone. Just gone. I felt my chest tighten. The fog had thickened now, closing around the clearing like slow smoke. I tried to convince myself it was all memory, that I was just misplacing details. But deep down I knew better, because when I looked again, the items had shifted again. The kettle was near my foot, the sleeping bag now half inside the tent. As if something unseen was rearranging them each time I blinked, I whispered into the air, "Who's there?" No answer, only the faint rustle of leaves from somewhere behind the trees. Then, movement. A pale figure. Just beyond the fog line, it stood behind a pine trunk, half hidden, head tilted slightly. For a moment, I thought it was a person. Maybe one of the campers who left this place. But its skin caught the light strangely, like wet wax, and when I blinked, it was gone. The fog closed in again, heavier than before. I stepped back slowly, eyes darting to every corner of the clearing. The campsite was quiet now, but not still. Something in it pulsed. Not sound, not light, just a faint presence. Like breath you can't hear, but still feel. I knelt, picked up the journal, and flipped it open. The pages were damp, the ink smudged, but a few words were still legible. "Don't look away." The next line bled into the paper, unreadable. I closed it fast. My hands were shaking again. When I lifted my head, the tents had changed positions. Both now faced me, like they were waiting. I dropped the journal and stepped back, heart pounding softly in my throat. The fog brushed my face. Cold, electric. Then the figure appeared again, closer this time. No eyes, just hollow sockets glowing faintly gray. I turned to run, but the forest didn't move the way it should. Each step sounded delayed, as if the ground itself waited before echoing back. When I finally reached the edge of the clearing, I looked back once. The campsite was empty again. Tents still. Fire pit untouched. No footprints but mine. Only the journal lay where I'd dropped it, its pages fluttering open by themselves. The words were gone. But the final line stayed etched in the wet paper. "You shouldn't have come back." I left before the fog could change its mind. Twilight had settled when I heard it. That low, steady hum, it began as a vibration in the air, faint enough to mistake for wind. But the trees weren't moving. The forest stood still. Every branch perfectly quiet, the hum pulsed softly through the ground, like a quiet heartbeat beneath the soil. Each note lingered longer than the last. I paused on the trail trying to place it. Not mechanical, not human. Something in between. The air smelled of pine sap and damp bark. Cool mist brushed my arms. The hum deepened. It seemed to come from ahead, somewhere deeper in the forest where the fog grew darker. I followed it. Not because I wanted to, but because it felt impossible not to. Each step made the sound clearer. It wasn't random anymore. There was rhythm, a slow, repeating pattern almost melodic. The closer I got, the stronger it became, not in volume, but in presence, like it was inside me. My chest vibrated with it. The air around me trembled. The trees began to sway, slowly, all at once. Though there was no wind to move them, their needles brushed together in perfect unison, creating a soft, whispering tone that folded into the hum itself. It was beautiful, and wrong. The fog glowed faintly between trunks, a pale shimmer pulsing with each beat. It almost looked alive. When I stopped walking, the hum stopped too, completely. The silence afterward felt heavier than the sound. I whispered into the air, asking if anyone was there. For a moment, nothing. Then, the hum returned. But now it was closer, all around me. The ground beneath my boots seemed to tremble, and the nearest tree bent slightly toward me, like it was listening. I took a step back. The hum rose in pitch, shivering through the air like static. More trees leaned in. Their trunks groaned, their branches quivered, and within their movement, I saw shapes, faint outlines of figures, caught between bark and fog. They swayed with the rhythm, faces hidden, arms almost touching the air. The melody grew hypnotic. Every breath I took matched its tempo. Every heartbeat felt borrowed. The hum began to form words. Not clear ones, but syllables that brushed my ears like something being whispered from inside the trees themselves. I reached out to touch one trunk. The bark was warm. It pulsed once in perfect sync with the sound. Then the hum stopped again, instantly. The forest froze. Every shape vanished. The glow faded to gray. Only the smell of pine remained, thick and wet in the cooling air. I stepped back, heart racing, trying to remember which direction I'd come from. Behind me, something creaked, a single branch twisting overhead. Then, faintly, the hum returned one last time. Softer now, almost kind. It drifted through the trees like a lullaby, low and distant, until it faded completely. When I finally turned to leave, the forest seemed ordinary again, quiet, harmless, just another evening in the pines. But when I looked up, I noticed something. Every tree around me was still swaying, just slightly, just enough to keep the rhythm going. The fog was thicker near the water. It rolled low across the ground, curling around the rocks like smoke. I could hear the creek before I saw it. A soft, steady trickle, the kind that sounds closer than it is. When I reached the bank, the air turned cold enough to sting. My breath came out white. The water moved slow, dark and glassy, like it didn't want to flow at all. I crouched near the edge, watching my reflection waver in the ripples. The forest behind me was quiet. Too quiet. Even the usual hum of insects was gone. Only the faint drip of water echoed under the trees. I leaned closer. My reflection leaned too, its face pale against the black current. Then it blinked. I didn't. The shock made me stumble back. The reflection stayed still, eyes open, watching. For a long time, I just stared. The creek looked normal again, nothing out of place. Maybe it was the fog, I told myself, or the way the light bent on moving water. I took a slow step forward. The reflection returned, but this time, something else stood beside it. A shape, tall, blurred. It leaned toward the water from a spot where nothing stood in the real world. The surface rippled once, and the figure's outline grew clearer. It looked human, but wrong. Its shoulders too long, its head bowed too low. I whispered, "Hello?" No answer. But the reflection's mouth moved. Not words, just the shape of breathing. The fog thickened, stretching over the creek until the far side disappeared. Only the water remained visible, shining faintly beneath the mist. The shadow moved again. It stepped closer, out of the reflection, onto the surface of the creek. The water didn't break. No splash, no ripple. It stood there, face hidden by the fog. My chest felt hollow. Every instinct screamed to run, but I couldn't. It mirrored my stillness, tilting its head slowly, like it was studying me. Then the air shifted. The fog brushed past my arm, cold and heavy, and when I looked again, the shadow was gone. Only my reflection remained, but it wasn't quite mine anymore. The eyes looked darker, the mouth slightly parted, as if something behind the glass of water was still breathing. I stepped back fast, nearly slipping on the wet stones. The creek gurgled quietly, as though swallowing a secret. I turned away, ready to leave, but before I could, a faint movement caught my eye, something following along the edge of the water. Matching my steps exactly, I looked again. Nothing there. But when I turned my head, the surface of the creek rippled once more, as if something unseen had stepped back into it. The reflection stared up at me again. And this time it smiled. The expression lingered even after I moved, even after I ran. By the time I reached the trail, the fog had thinned, the air warm again, almost normal. I tried not to look back, but as I passed one last bend, I saw the creek winding behind the trees, and for a moment, a figure walked along its surface, calm, patient, like a shadow still waiting for someone else to cross. Night had settled thick over the woods. The fog hung low, curling between the trees like slow breath. I'd been walking for hours, following no real path, just the faint glow of my campfire behind me and the dark ahead. Then I saw it, a small, steady light in the distance, flickering orange, like a flame behind glass. I thought maybe another camper was nearby. Relief came first. Then hesitation. The air felt heavier here, like the trees were listening. Still, I followed the glow. As I stepped closer, the outline of a man appeared beside it, sitting near a fire that burned low and silent. He wore a long coat, dark and tattered, and beside him rested an old lantern. The flame inside was pale, not quite yellow, not quite white, a color that didn't belong in the living world. He turned his head slowly when he noticed me. The movement was too smooth, like his bones didn't resist it. "Evening," he said. His voice was quiet, barely more than a breath. I nodded, trying to sound calm. "Didn't expect anyone else out here." He smiled faintly, though it didn't reach his eyes. "I keep watch," he whispered, "for the ones who wander too far." The words drifted through the air like smoke. He didn't blink, didn't move. The fire between us burned without crackle, without heat. Only the lantern flickered, its glass casting soft shapes against the fog. I sat a few feet away, close enough to feel the stillness around him. "Are you camping here?" I asked. He looked toward the dark trees. "Not camping," he said. "Guarding." The way he said it made my skin crawl. "Guarding what or who?" I glanced toward the forest. The mist seemed thicker now, almost pulsing, like it wanted to lean closer. "From what?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer right away. He only stared into the lantern's flame. "Not what?" he murmured. "Who?" His hand moved toward the lantern then, pale fingers brushing its handle. The skin looked strange, smooth, waxy, as if light could pass through it. I opened my mouth to speak again, but he looked up suddenly, eyes wide, and the fire went out. The forest swallowed the light. Only the lantern remained, glowing faintly between us. In that glow, his face looked different. "Not living, not gone. Somewhere in between, you should go," he said softly. His voice came from everywhere at once, around me, behind me, inside me. I froze. The lantern flickered harder, the flame bending sideways like pushed by invisible breath. When I looked back toward him, he was gone. No sound. No trace. Just the empty patch of ground where he'd been sitting. The fire pit was cold. The lantern sat in the dirt, still burning with that pale, impossible light. I didn't touch it. I just watched it sway, the flame moving like it was breathing. Then the fog shifted, curling upward into the shape of a face, his face, watching from the mist. It blinked once, then faded. The lantern dimmed, its glow softening until it barely existed. I backed away slowly, heart steady but cold. Every step felt heavier, as if something followed just behind the trees. When I reached the trail again, I turned once to look back. The clearing was empty. But far off in the fog, a single light floated between the pines, swinging gently, as though someone still carried it. Even now, when I close my eyes, I can still see that glow. And sometimes, when the forest goes too quiet, I think he's still out there, guarding, waiting, holding that lantern for the next lost soul to find. It had rained through the night. By morning, everything was soft. The ground, the air, even the sound. The forest floor looked like wet velvet, dark and heavy beneath the mist. I followed the old path down to the stream, boots sinking half an inch with every step. That's when I saw them, footprints, deep ones, fresh. They led from the edge of the woods straight toward the creek, but there was something off about them. Too long, too narrow, almost like someone had walked barefoot, except the toes weren't shaped right. I knelt down to look closer. The mud around the prints still glistened, like whatever made them had passed just minutes ago. I glanced around. Nothing moved. No sound but the steady drip of rain from the trees. Still, I felt watched. The prints continued down the bank, then stopped right at the water's edge. No return trail. No sign of anyone crossing. Just gone. I should have left it alone. But curiosity pulls harder than fear sometimes. So I followed the prints backward to where they started. They came from deeper in the woods, weaving between the trees in a line too straight, too purposeful. Every few steps, one print was pressed deeper than the rest, as if whatever it was had paused, turned its head and listened. The path led me to a fallen log, hollow and dark. Mud smeared the bark near the opening. Something had crawled through there recently. I crouched down, peering inside. It was empty. At least it looked that way. Then I heard it, a faint sound, just beyond the log, like a slow drag through wet leaves. I froze. The noise came again, closer this time, Something moving, steady and low. I stepped back quietly, heart thudding in my chest. The air around me felt heavier, like it didn't want me there. Then, from behind the log, a shape rose, not all at once. First a shoulder, then the curve of a head. It stood just tall enough to be human, but its movements weren't right. Too smooth, too careful. The rain softened, and in the silence I could hear it breathing, slow, wet. I couldn't see its face, but I could see the mud. Thick streaks of it clung to its skin, if that was skin at all. I took one quiet step back. Then another. The figure tilted its head. It didn't chase me. Didn't move closer, it just watched. And then, as I turned and ran, I heard the splash. Behind me, something heavy stepped into the creek. One step, then another. I didn't stop until I reached the main path again, where the ground turned solid beneath my boots. When I finally looked back, the prints were there too, leading out of the trees. Stopping right where I stood, no sound, no movement, just the faint trickle of water from the creek and a single streak of mud across the trail, like a finger dragged through wet paint. I left then. Didn't look back again, but later that night when I went to take off my boots, I saw it. A single muddy print pressed into the floor beside my bed. Too long. Too narrow. Still wet. The forest was still that afternoon. Too still. No wind, no birds. Just the faint weight of silence pressing between the trees. I remember pausing near a patch of ferns, watching the mist drift low across the ground. Everything looked frozen, like the woods had forgotten how to move. Then, the rustling began, soft at first. A shuffle. A brush of leaves, just beyond sight. I turned toward the sound, but there was nothing. Only the same motionless trees, the same pale fog hanging heavy in the air. I waited. It came again, a little closer this time. Like someone dragging their hand through the undergrowth. The sound stopped when I moved. Started when I stood still. It felt like the forest was breathing around me, exhaling through branches and roots. I took a step forward, slowly, eyes scanning the gray spaces between trunks. The rustling followed. Circling now. Always behind. Always out of reach. Hello? The word left my mouth before I meant it to. It sounded strange, muted, like the fog had swallowed it whole. The rustling stopped again. Total silence. Even my heartbeat felt too loud. Then, from the corner of my eye, a flicker. A shape moving behind the nearest pine. I turned fast, but it was gone. Only fog and the faint sway of branches. I waited there for what felt like minutes. Every time I thought it was over, the noise started again, faint, circular, curious, like something pacing. When I crouched low, I could see the ferns tremble, one after another, as if something invisible brushed past them, not wind, not animal, something deliberate. I whispered to myself to stay calm. Don't run! Don't make it worse. But the sound kept following, always from just beyond where I looked. I took a few steps backward, slow, measured. The rustling stopped. And then, it came from the other side. Fast. I spun around, but the fog was thick now, like a wall of white pressing close. I could barely see my hands. Could only hear that soft movement, circling tighter, closer, until it felt like the sound was inside the mist itself. Leaves brushed my shoulder. Something moved behind my ear. A whisper that wasn't words, just breath. I froze completely. Didn't blink. Didn't move, and the forest went silent again. The quiet hurt, too deep, too complete. I stayed like that for a long time, until my legs began to tremble. Finally, I turned and started walking back toward camp, keeping my eyes low to the ground. The moment I stepped out of that thick fog, the world changed. Birds called again. A breeze stirred the branches. Everything sounded normal. I stopped and looked back. The fog had already swallowed the path. Gone. But as I stood there, the rustling started again, just once, from deep inside the mist. A soft brush of leaves. A reminder that it was still there, listening, waiting. And when I left the forest that evening, I realized something that made my chest tighten. For every step I took away, the rustling kept pace, softly, until the last sound faded just beyond my reach. Midnight had settled over the woods like a slow exhale. Everything was still. Even the wind had forgotten how to move. I sat near the edge of the clearing, wrapped in my blanket, listening to the silence press in. Then I saw it, a glow, faint and pale, drifting between the trees. It wasn't a lantern, not fire, not anything I could explain. The light moved gently, like it was floating through fog, casting long, thin shadows that stretched and folded across the ground. I stood without meaning to. The air felt heavier now, damp with the smell of pine and cold earth. The glow paused, hovering just beyond the nearest tree. My breath came out in a small cloud. It shimmered in the pale light, as if the air itself was alive. The light flickered once, twice, then it began to drift away, slowly, deliberately, as if it wanted me to follow. I did. Each step sank softly into moss. The forest around me seemed endless, the trunks like dark pillars reaching into nothing. The light stayed ahead, never too far, always just beyond reach. When it passed through the branches, the leaves glowed silver for a heartbeat, then faded back to shadow. It was beautiful and wrong. Something about the way it moved, too smooth, too silent, made my chest tighten. I whispered to myself, asking what it was, but my voice didn't sound like my own. The forest didn't answer, only the soft hum of the night, low, steady, like the ground itself was breathing. Then the light stopped again. It hovered beside a fallen pine, illuminating the bark with a soft, white shimmer. That's when I noticed it, footprints in the dirt, leading to the very spot where the light floated. Bare feet, small, half faded by dew, and just as I reached the edge of the clearing, the glow pulsed once, then vanished. The darkness that followed felt thicker, like the forest had inhaled it all at once. I stood there waiting for it to return, but it didn't. Only silence. The air felt hollow, emptied of everything that had been alive a moment ago. I turned slowly, expecting to see nothing, but the trees behind me were different. The shapes looked wrong, taller, watching, and then, deep between the trunks, I saw it again. The same pale light. Farther now, blinking softly, almost like it was breathing. I should have gone back. I didn't. I followed once more, drawn by something I couldn't name. Every few steps, the glow slipped behind another tree, only to reappear a few paces ahead. It was leading me somewhere. I could feel it. The forest floor grew colder. Frost began to gather on the fallen leaves, crisping beneath my boots. The hum beneath everything deepened, a sound too low to hear, but strong enough to feel in my bones. And then the light stopped again, resting at the base of an old oak. The trunk was hollow, dark, and from inside came a faint warmth, like breath. I stepped closer, close enough to see the light reflecting in my own eyes. It blinked once more, then slipped behind the tree and disappeared completely. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was listening. I stood there until my body began to shake, from cold or fear, I couldn't tell. Finally, I turned back toward camp. Every few steps I looked over my shoulder, but the forest was dark again. No glow, no hum, just quiet. When I reached my tent, the clearing looked smaller than before, as if the trees had moved closer. And just as I unzipped the flap, something caught my eye. In the reflection of my lantern glass behind me, a faint, pale shimmer drifted through the trees, closer this time, watching, and then it was gone, leaving only silence and the strange, hollow feeling that the forest had just exhaled my name. The fog came early that night, thicker than I'd ever seen. By the time I stepped outside my tent, the forest was gone. Only white, soft, endless white. I could barely see the ground beneath my boots. Every sound felt distant, smothered by the cold. My breath hung in front of me, not drifting, not fading, just staying there, frozen mid-air. It looked almost solid, like glass. I reached out. It didn't move. A strange chill crawled across my skin, not from the air, from something deeper. I tried to listen for the creek nearby. Nothing. The usual hum of the woods was gone. Only silence. I started walking, hands out in front of me, hoping to find the trail again. The ground crunched softly, thin ice beneath the mud. Each step left a mark that shimmered faintly, like frost forming beneath my feet. And then I saw them. Shapes, far off, tall, barely visible through the mist. At first I thought they were trees, but trees don't move. These did. Slow. Dragging motions, their outlines bending and reforming with the shifting fog. I stopped breathing, and the air froze in front of me again, a faint white cloud suspended like a ghost. I took a step back. The figures paused. I could feel their attention, like the weight of eyes that weren't meant to be seen. I turned my head slowly, but every direction looked the same. Fog. White. Endless. No way to tell where I'd come from. No way to tell what was real anymore. When I moved again, the shapes began to move too. Slow, steady, matching my rhythm. It didn't feel like pursuit. It felt like reflection. As if the fog itself was trying to remember me. The air grew colder. Each breath froze quicker than the last, hanging beside me in delicate clouds. When I reached out to push one aside, it cracked, like breaking thin ice on a pond. The sound echoed far too loud. The shapes stopped again. Silence returned, so thick it rang in my ears. I whispered, not even sure why. The word vanished before I could hear it. Then a sound, faint, heavy, like something exhaling inside the mist. My breath froze again, this time inches from my face. I took another step back. The frozen air followed, sliding slowly toward me. No, not air. Something inside it. A shape, faintly human, its edges trembling like smoke in reverse. I could feel the cold pulling closer. Every nerve screamed to run, but my body wouldn't listen. Then, as quickly as it appeared, the fog shifted, and the figure dissolved. The air around me warmed slightly. The breath clouds fell to the ground like mist, melting back into the earth. The silence didn't break. It just changed, from stillness to waiting. I turned and began walking faster, not knowing where I was going, only that I needed to move. Behind me, the fog rippled. For a moment, I saw my own frozen breath trails still hanging in place, marking every step I'd taken, like a ghostly map suspended mid-air. Each cloud shimmered faintly, and then one by one they vanished. When the last one faded, so did the path behind me. The forest swallowed it whole. By the time I found my tent again, my hands were shaking. The air was normal, soft, damp, alive. I unzipped the flap, ducked inside, and sat for a long time, listening to my own breathing. No fog. No figures. Just me. But as I looked at the lantern beside me, I saw something small. A faint patch of white, hovering above the fabric of the tent. Still, frozen. My last breath from outside, lingering where it shouldn't. Watching. By evening, the fog had thinned, but the quiet stayed. The kind of quiet that doesn't belong to nature, the kind that listens back. I walked the path slowly, hands in my pockets, eyes tracing the pale streaks of light between the trees. For the first hour, everything felt normal, peaceful even then. Someone said my name, softly, close. I froze. The sound had come from behind me, just above a whisper, like someone leaning close enough to breathe the word. But when I turned, the trail was empty. Only mist curling through the trees like smoke. I told myself it was imagination. Echo, maybe. The woods can do strange things with sound. I started walking again, a little faster. Minutes passed. Then, another voice. Lower. Almost familiar. I stopped again. Waited. Nothing. The air felt heavy pressing against my ears. And then it came again, this time from the left, half hidden by distance, a sentence I couldn't understand. Muffled, like someone speaking underwater, I listened harder, trying to catch the words. But every time I thought I could, the forest shifted, and the voice slipped away. The next one came from the right, higher, fainter, a woman's voice maybe. Saying my name again, I turned, heart beating slow but hard. No one, just fog, and trees that looked too still. When I tried to speak, my voice came out thin, unsteady. "Who's there?" Silence. Then laughter, soft, breathy, just beyond reach. Not cruel, just knowing. It faded quickly, replaced by whispers layered over each other, like two people murmuring from opposite sides of the path. One whisper stopped. The other kept going, and I realized it was saying my name again. But this time, it sounded like me. My own voice, echoed back from somewhere deeper in the woods. I took a step forward, and the whisper took a step back. Perfect rhythm. Perfect imitation, I called out again, louder. And the echo responded instantly, mimicking the exact tone, the same hesitation, but it wasn't delayed. It spoke at the same time, like it already knew what I was going to say. The forest around me began to repeat the sounds, each word bouncing softly between the trees, splitting, twisting until it didn't sound human anymore. The air grew colder. Every breath came out sharp. Then I heard something else, a faint hum underneath the voices. Steady, rhythmic. I turned in circles, trying to locate it. The sound came from everywhere. Above, below, inside my own skull. I pressed my palms to my ears. The voices didn't stop. They spoke through the pressure, soft, overlapping, chanting something just beyond language. And between the murmurs, I caught fragments. "Don't look away. Stay with us. You remember, don't you?" Each phrase familiar in a way that made no sense. Like I'd dreamed them once, the whispers slowed. Then one by one, they faded. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was too precise. Like everything around me had paused mid-breath, and then a single voice returned. Close, right beside my ear. It whispered my name once more. Slowly, almost kindly. Then it laughed, a dry, hollow sound, and repeated my own last word back to me in perfect imitation. When I turned, there was no one there, only the path stretching endlessly forward, and the fog curling like smoke behind me. I started walking again. Didn't look back, didn't speak, but the forest did. Quietly, patiently, it began repeating my footsteps, each one a half-beat too late, an echo following just behind. And as the trees thinned toward camp, I realized something that made my stomach twist. It wasn't the forest repeating me. It was me repeating it. The forest was darker than usual that night. Even the stars seemed afraid to look down. I wandered off the main trail, drawn by a faint glow between the trees. At first I thought it was lightning bugs. But the light was steady, low, and warm. I followed it, breathing in the smell of damp pine and ash. The fog thinned just enough to show it. A small campfire, burning quietly in the middle of an empty clearing. No tent. No tools, no footprints, just the fire. Still burning, perfectly round, as if someone had built it only moments ago. I stepped closer, waiting for the crackle, the hiss of wood. But there was none. The flames moved in silence. Not a whisper of heat. I crouched beside it, holding out my hand. Nothing, no warmth. Just the illusion of it. The ashes at its base stirred, lifting in tiny spirals as if caught in a breeze that didn't exist. I felt my pulse in my throat. This wasn't a fire. Not really. The light flickered and shadows bloomed across the clearing, thin human shapes that swayed gently in the glow. I counted 3 at first, then 4, then too many. Each one leaned toward me, their outlines rippling like smoke. I tried to step back, but the air behind me felt thicker, like the fog had turned solid. The figures didn't move closer. They just watched, faces half-formed, their mouths opening in unison. I couldn't hear them, but I felt the words buzzing faintly against my ribs. The fire brightened once, a pulse of light so pale it turned the trees white, and then it dimmed again, leaving faint trails of color behind my eyelids. I blinked hard. The shapes were gone. Only shadows remained, stretching long across the ground, not matching any angle of the flames. I knelt beside the fire again. Looked closer. Inside the embers I could see movement, slow, graceful. Figures turning, as if walking in a circle. Their bodies looked carved from ash. Fragile and flickering, I reached out, just close enough to disturb the air. The fire flared instantly, and I heard something. A faint sigh. Almost like relief, then silence. The flames bent toward me. Every shadow in the clearing leaned the same way. My heartbeat echoed in my ears. I whispered something without realizing, an apology maybe, and just like that, the fire went out. No smoke, no glow. Only the faint smell of burnt pine. The clearing fell into darkness so deep it felt like the world had shut its eyes. For a long time I didn't move, didn't breathe. Then from somewhere behind me came a faint crack, a branch breaking. I turned slowly. In the distance, another glow appeared, smaller this time, half hidden behind a tree. Another fire, identical, waiting. I didn't go to it, not again. Instead, I backed away, one slow step at a time, keeping my eyes on that light until the fog swallowed it whole. When I reached camp, I could still smell the ashes, still feel that soft vibration in my chest, like something had whispered through me. Not to me. I sat beside my own fire for a while. Watching the flames dance, it looked normal, warm, real, but when I blinked, for just an instant, the light dimmed, and I saw shadows dancing again, moving in a slow, perfect circle around my fire now, silent, waiting. The fog came in waves that night, thick enough to erase the trees, thin enough to make me think I could still see them. I sat by the dying fire, listening to the woods breathe. Every sound was slow. A drop of water, a shifting branch, the faint sigh of wind that didn't move the leaves. When I looked up, I thought I saw something pale between the pines, two small lights, soft and still. I squinted. They vanished. I told myself it was embers from the fire reflected in the mist, but then I saw them again, farther to the left now, perfectly level, perfectly still, like eyes. I stood slowly. The air felt heavier than before, like breathing through cold smoke. The fog thickened as I stepped away from the fire. My boots sank into wet moss, the smell of earth sharp and sour. The lights appeared again, a little closer. Two white dots hovering just above the ground. They didn't flicker, didn't blink. The forest around me had gone completely silent. Even the usual rustle of the pines was gone, as if the trees were holding their breath too. I whispered something. A question, a name, but the fog swallowed it instantly. No answer. I took another step. The lights dimmed slightly, then brightened again, like they were breathing with me. And then a second pair appeared, farther back, higher up, blinking in perfect unison. I froze. The air felt wrong, too cold for my lungs, too still for sound. More lights flickered in the distance, each pair forming and fading in rhythm, eyes everywhere, some near the ground, some higher, hidden behind the trees. They didn't move closer, but I could feel them watching. Dozens, maybe more. The fog pulsed faintly, like something huge was shifting inside it. I turned slowly, trying not to make noise. Everywhere I looked, the pale eyes followed, blinking in soft, perfect waves. Not random. In sync, like a signal, I backed away toward the faint glow of my campfire. The light felt weaker now, like it was struggling to exist. The fog swallowed the edges of the clearing. The eyes stayed just beyond it, always in pairs, always blinking together. One blink, two. Pause. Then again, as if waiting for something. I crouched beside the fire, feeding it more wood, trying to make it brighter. The The flames climbed high, orange, wild, alive. But the light didn't touch the fog, it just glowed against it, like shining into glass, and through that dull reflection, I could still see them eyes. Hundreds now, watching from all directions. The air began to hum, a low vibration I could feel in my teeth. I covered my ears, but the sound was inside me, steady, soft, like breath. And then, all at once, every pair blinked together, the fog rippled outward, like a wave. For one heartbeat, I thought I saw shapes behind it, tall, thin silhouettes standing perfectly still. Then, the fog folded back in on itself. The eyes went out, all of them. The silence that followed was so deep, I could hear the firewood, popping like gunshots. I stayed there, staring into the dark, until my legs started to shake. When I finally crawled into my tent, I didn't close my eyes. Not really, because each time I blinked, I saw them again. Those pale, unblinking eyes, staring through the fog that wasn't there anymore. And somewhere far beyond the trees, something blinked back, slowly, deliberately, in perfect unison. It was late afternoon when I found it. The light had turned that pale gray that makes everything look like it's underwater. The forest was still, too still, no birds, no insects, just the slow creak of branches above me. That's when I heard it, a low hum. Soft, constant, like the earth itself was breathing. I followed it through the pines, past fallen trunks and cold patches of moss, until I saw the tree. It was enormous. Older than the rest. Its bark was split open like a wound, a hollow mouth, dark and wide enough for a person to stand inside. The hum came from there. It wasn't loud, but I could feel it in my ribs. A faint vibration, steady, patient, like something waiting. I stepped closer. The air changed, cooler, damp, with a scent like rain-soaked wood and something faintly metallic. I could see inside now. The hollow wasn't empty. Shadows clung to the curved walls, shifting slightly, like mist trapped behind glass. I squinted. They weren't shadows, they were shapes. Human shapes, faint outlines, frozen mid-motion. One looked like it was reaching forward. Another like it was trying to turn away. All of them caught in that same gray stillness, as if they'd been paused between breaths. I whispered something, maybe my own name, but the hum swallowed it whole. For a moment, I thought I saw one of the shapes move, just a flicker, a tilt of the head. Then still again, my hand lifted on its own. The bark looked soft in places, like skin after rain. I touched it. The hum deepened. It rolled through my arm, up my shoulder, and into my chest, and then a whisper. Inside the tree, not from one voice. From many, soft, tangled, like words spoken underwater. I stepped back fast, but the hum followed me, a pulse that seemed to echo in the ground beneath my feet. The air thickened. Each breath felt slower, heavier. I looked into the hollow again. The shapes were clearer now, their outlines glowing faintly with a pale, almost silvery light, and I could see their faces, empty, blurry, but staring straight ahead, right where I stood. The whispers overlapped, filling the air with broken fragments. A name I almost recognized, a phrase I couldn't quite catch. The sound wasn't loud, but it filled my head until I couldn't think of anything else. I pressed my hand against my ear. It didn't help. The whisper came from inside. Inside the hum, inside the tree, and somehow, inside me. I took another step back. The light dimmed instantly, as though the sun had blinked. Fog started crawling across the ground, thin tendrils curling around my boots. The hum softened, a sigh through the wood, and then faded to silence. The forest felt hollow now, empty in a way it hadn't before, but the tree still stood there, still waiting. I turned to leave, but something about the bark caught my eye. Where my hand had touched it, the surface was darker, slightly indented, like it had absorbed the warmth from my skin. I reached toward it again, and before I could stop myself, pressed my palm to the same spot. This time, the bark was warm. The hum returned, softer than before, almost like it was breathing with me. And from deep within the hollow, a single whisper formed words. Slow, clear, stay. The vibration stopped. The light inside flickered once, then died completely. Only silence. Only the faint ache in my hand where the bark had pulsed against my skin. I stumbled back into the fog. The forest had its sounds again. Wind, leaves, distant trickles of water. Normal things. But as I walked away, the hum started again. Faint, rhythmic, following each of my footsteps, as if the tree was listening. When I finally turned for one last look, the hollow glowed faintly. A dim pulse, like a heartbeat buried in wood. And for a split second, I thought I saw a new shape inside. One standing just like me. Still. Watching. Waiting for the next voice to touch the bark. It was close to midnight when I reached the bridge. The air was colder there, as if the forest had been holding its breath. Mist floated low across the ground, creeping toward the water. The trees behind me disappeared one by one into the fog. I almost didn't see the bridge at first. It stretched out in front of me, thin, wooden, faded to gray. Each plank warped by time, the rails barely holding together. Beneath it, the water was black. Not still, not moving either. Just pulsing softly like something sleeping below the surface. I hesitated at the edge. The first plank looked worn, slick with dew. When I stepped on it, it creaked. A long, slow cry that disappeared into the dark. The sound echoed, not ahead, not behind, but beside me. I paused. The air felt different there. Dense. Cool, smelling faintly of iron and wet leaves. Another step. Another creak, and again that echo, perfectly matched. Like footsteps walking with me. I turned my head, but the fog was thick enough to swallow the rails. Only pale water below, rippled by something unseen. The bridge seemed longer than it should have been. I could no longer see the end. Only darkness ahead and that soft wooden groan with every movement, step, creak, and then a second one. Half a beat later, I stopped breathing. The echo stopped too. The silence after was heavy, like the forest had gone hollow. I tried to listen, but the water beneath me stirred faintly, breaking into circles that spread without a source. I leaned over the side. The reflection of the bridge was sharp, clearer than it should have been in the dark. I could see my outline, still and small. But beside it, another, a faint shadow standing just out of reach. It didn't move. My pulse echoed in my ears, louder than the hum of the water below. When I took another step, the reflection stepped too. Not the same rhythm, slightly delayed, like it was learning. The bridge creaked again. The air trembled, and I could smell the wood. Old, wet, sweet with decay. The fog shifted across the planks, coiling around my ankles. I told myself not to look down again, but I did. The reflection was closer now. It wasn't my shape anymore. Taller, thinner, no face, just a hollow blur where a face should be. The planks groaned, deep and slow, like the bridge was bending under more than one weight. I took another step forward. Another creak followed, a split second after mine. I tried to walk faster, but the echo kept perfect pace. Every step answered, step, step, step. I could see the end of the bridge now, a faint break in the fog, but it didn't seem to get closer. The air was vibrating. The wood beneath me trembled. Each breath came out colder than before. I stopped again. The echo didn't. One more step came after mine, soft and final. The planks behind me shifted. Something heavy settled there. I turned slowly. The fog moved in waves, and for a moment I thought I saw it, a figure, pale against the darkness, still, watching. The reflection below shimmered, and two shapes stood side by side now. One of them was me. The other wasn't. The bridge swayed slightly, a low groan echoing beneath the water. I gripped the rail, slick, cold, alive with vibration. The figure didn't move, but the reflection tilted its head and smiled, not on the surface. Beneath it, the water rippled outward, the reflection breaking apart, only to reform again, closer this time. I stumbled back. The boards cried out beneath me. When I blinked, the figure was gone. The fog cleared just enough to show the end of the bridge again. 10, maybe 15 steps away. I started walking. Each footfall was met with another. Right behind, creak, creak, creak. The air thickened with moisture, clinging to my skin. When I finally reached the last plank, I turned back. The bridge stretched into the dark, vanishing into fog. No figure, no movement, only water, rippling softly, as though something beneath it was laughing without sound. I stepped off the bridge. The instant my boots touched solid ground, the echo stopped. No more creaks, no more reflection, just stillness. But as I looked one last time, the water shifted again, and I saw a single footprint sink into the damp wood, right where I'd stood. Then another, walking forward, slowly, toward me. The fire had gone quiet hours ago. Only a thin line of smoke drifted up from the ashes, fading into the still night air. I should have gone to sleep. But something about the way the smoke moved kept me watching. It didn't rise straight. It curved, twisting slowly, as if aware of itself. The air around me was still. No wind, no breeze, no reason for it to move like that. Yet it did. It swirled once, then again, circling just above the fire pit. And then it came lower, the faint scent of burnt wood mixed with damp soil. It brushed against my arm, cold, though it should have been warm. I froze. My breath felt thick in my chest, like the air had turned heavy. The smoke drifted closer, curling around my wrist, then my shoulder. It didn't sting. It didn't choke. It only lingered soft and deliberate, as if studying me. When I leaned back, it followed, a slow wisp, thin and weightless, moving where I moved. The fire gave a faint sigh beneath it, a flicker of red. Then nothing, and still the smoke remained. It floated forward, away from camp. Pausing every few feet as if waiting for me to follow, I told myself to stay, to let it go. But the forest felt wrong without it, too silent, too open. So I followed. The night air was colder past the clearing. Each breath came out in pale wisps, mixing with the drifting smoke ahead. The trees grew taller here, their trunks slick with dew, their shadows bending over the path. The smoke led the way, always just far enough to stay ahead, never fading completely. It moved like memory, slow, familiar. There was something gentle in it, something I couldn't name. I kept walking. The ground was soft with leaves, and my footsteps barely made a sound. The smoke turned once, looping around an old stump as if marking it. Then it rose higher, spinning lazily toward the treetops before drifting forward again. It didn't scatter. It didn't fade. It wanted me to see. After a while, the trees began to thin. The fog grew thicker, rolling low across the ground. And there, in the heart of it, was a clearing. The smoke circled above the fog, slowly, like a thread winding around something unseen. The air hummed faintly. Not a sound, a feeling. A vibration deep inside my chest. The fog below shimmered. Then it shifted. At first I thought it was the wind, but the shapes forming inside it were too precise. Too human. Faces, pale, blurred, half-formed from mist and shadow. One turned toward me. Its mouth moved, not quite a smile, not quite sorrow. Another appeared beside it. Then another. Dozens of faces, all drifting within the fog, their edges dissolving and reforming like breath on glass. I took a step closer. The air grew heavier. The hum deepened. The smoke circled above them now, slow and deliberate, drawing faint rings of ash-colored light. Each face seemed to move when the smoke did, as if tethered to it. I recognized one. Or thought I did, a tilt of the chin, the faint shape of eyes I had seen once before. Someone I'd lost long ago. I blinked. The face shifted, sad, gentle, gone. The others watched in silence, their expressions soft but unreadable. When I spoke, my voice barely made a sound. "Who are you?" The fog quivered, and a single ripple spread through the clearing. The hum turned into a low sigh, like the forest exhaling all at once. The smoke dipped lower, brushing across the fog's surface. The faces followed its motion, blurring together until they were one shape, a single moving shadow with many eyes. I took a step back. The ground felt unsteady beneath me. The shadow leaned forward, as if mirroring me. Then it split apart again, faces dissolving into mist. The smoke rose higher, its movements slower now, weaker, as though the wind was finally reclaiming it. One by one, the faces faded into the fog, until only one remained, still, faint, watching me. It didn't speak, but I could feel something, a memory brushing against mine. A familiar ache, like longing. Then it too began to fade. The fog sank back into the earth. The hum stopped, and the smoke, that strange, deliberate wisp, drifted once more around me. It circled my hand, soft as breath, before rising into the trees and vanishing among the branches. I stood there until the mist thinned, until the forest felt ordinary again. But even then, the smell of smoke lingered, faint, warm. And when I finally turned back toward camp, I realized something. The path behind me was empty. No footprints, no trace, only a single wisp of gray floating just above the trail, following. It was near midnight when I first heard it. A soft cry somewhere beyond the trees. It wasn't loud. It wasn't close. Just enough to make the night feel awake. The air was still, heavy with damp earth and pine. The fire beside me had burned low, its glow barely reaching past my knees. I thought it was an animal at first. A fox, maybe, or something small and lost. But the longer I listened, the more it sounded human. A single sob, then silence. Then again, each time a little closer, the forest seemed to lean in with it. Branches shifting, leaves trembling even though the air hadn't moved. I waited, my breath shallow. The crying stopped. The quiet that followed felt too deep to belong to the woods. Like everything was holding its breath. Then I heard it again, softer now, almost behind me, a quiet, broken voice. Wet with sorrow, it didn't sound angry, just tired, like something that had been crying for a very long time. I turned slowly. The shadows behind the tent swayed faintly. Nothing there. Only the dark, I whispered. "Hello?" No answer. Only the faint echo of my own voice drifting back from between the trees. But it came back wrong. My name was in it. Not spoken clearly, but shaped in the echo, as if the forest itself was trying to repeat me. My skin prickled. The cry came again, farther away now, but warped, as if it had passed through something before reaching me. It rose and fell in uneven waves, like the forest couldn't decide how close it wanted to bring it. The crying turned to a whisper once, faint words I couldn't make out, then nothing, just the hum of silence. The kind that fills your ears when you realize you're completely alone. I thought about going inside the tent, zipping it closed, pretending I hadn't heard anything, but something inside me, something strange, wanted to listen. Because there was pain in that voice, real pain, and it felt familiar. I sat very still, hands tight around my knees. The forest stretched on forever, a maze of black shapes and pale fog. The moon hung low, a dull white eye behind the trees. Then from somewhere deep within the dark came another sound, not crying this time. A whisper, my name again, clearer, closer. The air shifted. A faint cold moved through the clearing, brushing against my neck. The fire hissed weakly. Its last ember cracked, sending a small line of smoke into the night. I whispered back. "What do you want?" The forest answered, Not with words, but with something that sounded like breathing. Long, drawn out, echoing from every direction at once. It wasn't wind. It was slower, measured. The crying returned. But now it came from both sides, left, right, far, near, like dozens of voices all mimicking one another through hollow throats. Each one called my name in a slightly different tone. A whisper here, a sob there, a laugh that never became laughter. I pressed my palms to my ears. It didn't help. The sound was inside, like the trees themselves were repeating it through their hollow cores. The smell of damp bark and ash filled my nose. My breath came out shallow, uneven. Then, as suddenly as it began, everything stopped. No crying, no whispers. Just silence. The kind that hums and makes you think you can hear your own pulse. I lowered my hands slowly, waited. A single tear slid down my cheek, but I hadn't been crying. The ground beneath me felt colder. When I touched it, my fingers came away wet, not with dew, but something thicker. I didn't look. I didn't move, because from deep within the forest a final sound came, my name. Spoken exactly in my own voice, not echoed, not distant. Perfect. And wrong. It lingered for a moment, then faded into the still air like smoke losing its shape. The silence that followed felt almost kind. As if whatever had been crying was finally done. I sat there until dawn, watching the fog lift and the light crawl across the wet earth. When the birds began to stir, their calls sounded off, soft, hesitant, as if they too were waiting for something else to finish speaking. I never heard the crying again. But sometimes, when the wind moves through the trees at night, it bends my name just slightly wrong, like it remembers, and wants me to remember too. It began as a simple walk, early autumn, the kind of day where the forest feels half asleep. The air was cool, damp with old leaves and moss. A faint mist hung low, weaving through the trunks like drifting breath. I followed a trail I didn't remember seeing before. Narrow, uneven, lined with stones that looked older than the trees themselves. It curved gently, pulling me deeper. Each step felt familiar, and yet wrong. I glanced back once. The path behind me seemed longer than it should have been. The trees there leaned inward, as if closing over where I'd walked. When I turned forward again, the trail had shifted. The bend that should have led downhill now ran left. A small detail, but I knew it wasn't the same. I kept going. The forest was quiet. No birds, no insects, just the soft crunch of my boots and the distant hum of air through the branches. Every few steps, the ground changed slightly. Darker soil, lighter leaves, a smell of wet bark, then suddenly dry pine, like I was walking through moments, not places. At one point, I stopped to rest my hand against a tree trunk. The bark felt smooth. Too smooth, like skin worn by years of touch. The trail behind me was gone, completely, only thick undergrowth where I knew I'd just come from. I blinked hard, thinking maybe the fog had swallowed it. But the mist barely moved. It stayed, waiting. When I stepped backward, the ground shifted beneath my heel. A faint crunch, then a hollow sound, like stepping on something that wasn't earth. I looked down. The soil there pulsed once, just barely. I froze. Then the trail returned, perfectly normal, as if it had never vanished. My throat felt dry. I whispered to no one, "Don't play with me." The path didn't answer. It only stretched ahead again, inviting. So I walked, carefully now, watching every root, every flicker of movement between trees. The deeper I went, the more it began to feel like the trail was aware of me. Sometimes it narrowed just enough that I had to turn sideways. Sometimes it opened into patches of pale grass that looked almost like faces when I glanced too quickly. Each time I tried to mark a tree, the bark bled sap, thick and slow, like it wanted to keep the wound hidden. The forest pressed closer. The air grew colder, denser, full of something that hummed beneath the silence. I realized then, the trail wasn't leading me anywhere. It was moving around me. When I stopped walking, the earth beneath my feet stilled. But if I looked too long, the faintest ripple ran through the dirt, like breath shifting under a blanket. I turned around again. The way back was different, wider, brighter, but wrong. There was no curve where there should have been one. The roots twisted like veins, crossing over themselves, alive in a way I couldn't understand. I knelt and placed my hand flat on the ground. It was warm. A slow vibration pulsed beneath my palm. A heartbeat, steady, patient. The trail was watching me, not with eyes, not with form, but with awareness. Every time I thought of leaving, the path shifted slightly, as if waiting for me to decide. It didn't want me lost. It wanted me here. The mist thickened until I could barely see past my fingertips. Shapes moved inside it, thin human silhouettes that vanished when I blinked. I whispered again, "Where are you taking me?" The ground quivered, just once. Enough to answer. I didn't move after that. Not forward, not back. I stood there listening to the faint rhythm under the soil, to the almost breath that matched my own. When the fog finally lifted, I saw my boot prints leading behind me. They stopped halfway down the trail, then turned around, walking back toward me, but I hadn't gone back. I stared at them until the light began to fade. The prints shifted slightly, as if settling into place, and when I finally took a step away, the trail moved with me, reshaping, stretching, keeping me in its center. By dusk, the forest had swallowed all direction. There was no beginning, no end, only this path, breathing softly beneath my feet, waiting for me to take just one more step. It began near dusk. The light was thin, that pale orange kind that barely holds on before night. I was walking back toward camp, fog already beginning to crawl through the trees. Each step pressed soft into damp earth. Every breath came out pale. The forest was still. Too still. That's when I noticed it, my shadow. Didn't move right. When I lifted my hand, it followed. A second late. The lag was small, but enough to feel wrong. I blinked, thinking it was just the light. But when I turned, the shadow stayed where it was, perfectly still. The fog drifted past it. And for a moment it looked solid, like something painted onto the ground. Then, slowly it moved again, but I hadn't. It tilted its head, just slightly, mirroring a gesture I hadn't made. The air grew heavier, pressing against my skin. A faint chill moved through my chest, like breath I couldn't control. I stepped backward. The shadow didn't. It only swayed as though deciding whether to follow. The fog thickened. Branches above blurred into gray silhouettes. The ground seemed to pulse with soft light, the kind that comes before moonrise. I whispered to myself, "Don't look again." But I did, and there it was, closer now. Its edges flickered, breaking apart, reforming, like smoke trying to remember its shape. When I turned to leave, it stretched, across roots, across the trunk of a tree, pulling itself longer than it should have been, and then it disappeared. I didn't hear it move, didn't feel a breeze. It was just gone. For a moment, I thought I was safe. The air felt clearer, the fog less dense. But then I saw another, near a boulder to my right, a shadow with no source. No tree above it, no rock tall enough to cast it. It flickered, like light beneath water, and when I exhaled, it pulsed with me, as though breathing my breath. Something inside me went still. I walked faster, following what little of the trail I could see, but with each turn, another shape appeared, a shadow of a branch that wasn't there, a faint outline that slid across a fallen log, all of them moving in sync, but not with me. They mimicked pieces of my motion. A hand twitch, a tilt of the head, a pause in breath, almost playful. I wanted to run, but the air was too thick now. My legs felt like they were wading through fog instead of air. The forest dimmed to gray. Even the trees lost their color. I reached the clearing where my campfire had been, but the fire was out. The embers were cold, ash-damp and black. I turned slowly, and for a heartbeat, everything looked normal again. Then the ground shifted with light, and every shadow around me lifted. They peeled from the dirt, slowly, like layers of night being unrolled. No sound, just movement. Each one had the faint outline of something once human. Arms, legs, faces half-formed, none of them solid, but all of them aware. They stood around the circle where my camp had been. Still watching, one of them leaned forward. Its shape flickered, and the air between us warped, as though heat rose from cold ground. I felt something pull at my chest. Not physical, more like recognition. They were trying to remember me or become me. The nearest one raised its arm. I felt my own lift slowly, without command. It smiled, or maybe the fog shifted that way. And then, all at once, they sank back down. Every shadow flattened, sliding beneath the trees, melting into the soil like spilled ink. The silence that followed was absolute. No wind, no hum, only my breath, shaking, invisible in the dim air. When I looked down, my shadow had returned. It moved when I did, perfectly in sync. But it felt heavier, thicker. As I left the clearing, I noticed something strange. My shadow didn't fall behind me anymore. It clung to my feet, rising up slightly with every step, as if afraid to be left alone again. I didn't look back after that. The fog closed behind me and the forest swallowed all trace of light. Still, sometimes when I pause, I feel something lag just half a second behind. A flicker at the edge of my vision. A reminder that shadows remember when you notice them. The forest at night feels different, like it's awake, and I'm the only one who isn't supposed to be here. The fire burned low, only soft embers, pale and slow breathing. Fog pressed close to the tree line, curling around the trunks like something alive. I sat still, wrapped in my blanket, watching the shapes between the pines. Everything was quiet. No wind, no insects, just a deep, heavy silence that settled against my ears until I could hear my own pulse. That's when I saw it. A figure. Standing just beyond the reach of the firelight, it didn't move. Didn't sway like a branch. Didn't breathe, just stood there, where the darkness thickened into form. At first, I thought it was my eyes adjusting. A trick of light. The mind making shapes from the fog. But the longer I looked, the clearer it became. A person. Or something like one. Tall. Still. Every line of it too sharp to be shadow. The air grew colder. The flame flickered once, then steadied, as if afraid to draw attention. I didn't move. Couldn't. My throat felt tight, like sound would break something fragile if I tried to speak. The figure leaned forward slightly. Not a step, just awareness. It knew I'd seen it. A faint hum passed through the clearing. Low, barely there. It vibrated through the dirt beneath my boots, through my chest, through the still air between us. And then, everything stopped. Even the fire froze. Flame caught mid-flicker. No sound. No motion. The forest held its breath. I blinked, and in that blink, the figure shifted. Closer, still at the tree line, but the space between us had shortened. The fog had grown thicker, layering in pale ribbons that glowed faintly in the fire's dull light. I tried to stand, but my legs didn't answer. Every muscle felt pinned, like the air itself had weight. The figure didn't move again, but I could feel its stare, not on my face, but deeper. Somewhere inside, a pressure against my thoughts, like something gently testing the walls of my mind. It wasn't cruel, just curious, and that somehow made it worse. The fire crackled once, a soft, brittle sound. It startled me enough to breathe again. The moment I inhaled, the silence broke. Branches whispered overhead. Leaves trembled. The figure tilted its head, a single motion, so human and yet so wrong. I whispered, "Who are you?" My voice didn't sound like mine. Too thin, too far away. The figure didn't answer. But the fog behind it moved, as if something exhaled through the trees. For a heartbeat, the shadows thickened around it, swallowing everything below its shoulders. Only its face, or where a face should have been, remained faintly visible. A pale oval, empty, not featureless, just unreadable. It took one slow step forward, and the forest went still again. No wind, no hum, no heartbeat. The fire dimmed to gray. I should have run, should have screamed. But I just stood there watching as the figure froze mid-step, like it had reached the invisible edge of something. It stayed there, half hidden in fog, half alive in silence. I waited. So did it. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time didn't work right anymore. Finally, it began to fade. Not all at once. Slowly, like mist dissolving into the night. Its outline blurred. Then broke apart until only the feeling remained. That thick awareness pressing against the edges of my thoughts. When I blinked again, the spot was empty. The trees stood still. The fog shifted softly, like nothing had ever been there. But the silence stayed, even after the fire caught again, even after my hands started to shake. Every time I glanced toward the tree line, the air seemed to shimmer, a faint suggestion of something waiting, just beyond what my eyes could name. And when I finally lay down, trying to sleep, I felt it once more, not watching this time. Just near, close enough that I could feel the cold trace of breath curling against my ear. It didn't speak, didn't move. It simply waited for the fire to die again. It started in late autumn, when the air turned thin and the ground stayed damp long after morning. The trees behind the cabin were dying, slowly, beautifully, as if they knew it would be their last season. Every day, I walked the narrow path behind the fence. The soil there was soft, and the leaves had turned a deep rust red. Almost metallic in color, they fell strangely. Not with the wind, not with time. They drifted down in patterns, spirals, lines, sometimes circles around my boots. I used to think it was coincidence, that the forest simply breathed in its own rhythm. But lately it's been watching back. When I stand still, I can hear a faint hum in the branches, not wind. Something quieter, lower, like a pulse beneath the bark. The leaves shiver before they fall. Each one lets go at the same instant, as if obeying. The air smells of rust. Not iron, not blood, just decay pretending to be metal, and under the trees the undergrowth has started to change. The moss isn't green anymore. It's dark, flaked with reddish stains. If I touch it, my fingers come away tinted, like old dust rubbed from forgotten machinery. Sometimes I think I see shapes in it. When I'm not looking directly, when I'm just turning my head, a limb bent wrong. A face half-formed between the roots, always in the edge of my vision. Always gone by the time I blink. I tried to take a photo once, held my phone out, focused on the patch where I'd seen movement. But when I looked at the screen, nothing. Just leaves, still lifeless. Too still. The wind brushed through the branches above, but the leaves on the ground didn't stir. Not one. That's when I realized the patterns were deliberate. They didn't scatter randomly. They built something. A shape, shallow, spiraling outward like a marking. I stepped back. The soil beneath it looked darker than the rest. Wet. Breathing, maybe. I could swear I heard something beneath the ground. A slow shift, like something rolling over in its sleep. I told myself I was imagining it, that it was just water moving through roots. But the next morning, the spiral was gone. Completely. Every leaf had been replaced. Arranged differently. A new pattern, smaller, closer to the path I took home. I stopped walking there for a while, but the leaves began appearing in other places. By the cabin door, on the window ledge, on the steps, laid flat like offerings, each one the same color, that deep, impossible rust red. Their edges curled inward, as if whispering something I couldn't hear. At night, the forest glows faintly, just a dim shimmer through the fog. I keep the curtains closed now, but sometimes the reflection moves differently than it should. Like the trees outside aren't quite standing still. Last night, I dreamt of the undergrowth again, of kneeling beside it, pressing my hands into the soil. The earth pulsed once beneath my palms, warm, wet, alive. When I woke, my fingernails were lined with something red-brown, It smelled faintly metallic. The morning light didn't feel like morning. Too pale, too empty, and the forest, it was quiet. Not peaceful. Muted. Like everything inside it was holding its breath. I walked out anyway, to see if the patterns were still there. The path had vanished under the leaves. All the same color now, covering the ground in a thick, even layer. No direction. No edges. Just rust and silence. When I stepped forward, they moved. Not away from me. Around me. Swirling. Slow. As if remembering something. And in the corner of my eye, something shifted beneath them. Not an animal. Not wind, just a ripple in the ground. Following me, I didn't run. I don't know why. Maybe I was afraid to make a sound. By the time I reached the cabin, the leaves had stopped moving. But when I looked back, the spiral had returned. Wider, perfectly centered around where I had stood. The air trembled once. A soft hum, and then quiet. The rust-colored leaves haven't stopped falling since. They gather at the windows every night, pressing close, as if listening. And when I close my eyes, I can feel it again. That slow, patient pulse beneath the floorboards, waiting for me to go back into the woods. The fire had been steady all evening, small, warm, patient. It cracked softly under the canopy of pines. The air was cold enough to sting. Frost clung to the stones around the pit, and every breath floated pale into the dark. I remember leaning close to the flames, watching the edges of the logs glow like slow-moving veins. There was a comfort in it, a rhythm. Each flicker breathing in time with me, then it stopped. No wind. No warning, just gone. The flames folded in on themselves, like a lung exhaling for the last time. Ash drifted upward, then fell. The orange light bled away, leaving only the faint smell of burnt pine. I waited for the heat to return. It didn't. The forest around me felt too wide, too hollow. Branches stood still against the sky, their outlines sharp and thin as scars. I whispered to myself, just a word, just to hear something alive. But even my voice didn't sound right. It disappeared before reaching the trees. The darkness felt heavier than usual, like the night had forgotten how to breathe. I leaned forward, poked at the wood with a stick. The ashes were cold, utterly cold, as if hours had passed, not seconds. And then a spark, soft, blue-white, thin as a thread. It wound itself between the logs. Not fire, something quieter. The air around it shimmered. The light grew, not bright, but deep. It hummed faintly, a note too low to be heard fully. I could feel it in my chest. The campfire was burning again, but wrong. The color wasn't orange anymore. It was a pale silver glow, the kind that doesn't belong to flames. No smoke, no warmth, just light that felt aware. My shadow stretched behind me, longer than it should have. Too long. It bent across the clearing, curling against the trees. And in the corner of my eye, the others moved too. The trees, the stones, the shapes around the fire, their shadows twisted, as if peeling away from the things that made them. They didn't follow the light anymore. They moved on their own, slowly, deliberately. One reached toward the fire. Its fingers shook like smoke. The glow flickered, just once. And I thought I saw something behind it. A figure, almost human, standing where the fire had been. Not made of light, not made of dark. Something in between. The air changed. Heavy, dense. It smelled faintly of metal and rain. The fire pulsed again. With every flicker, the shadows changed shape. They stretched taller, leaned closer. Some bent like they were listening. Others curled into the ground as if sinking. I wanted to move. I didn't. My breath came out in short clouds. They vanished too fast, as though the air was swallowing them whole. When I looked back, the figure by the fire was gone. Only the glow remained. It rippled once like water disturbed by a silent hand, and then the light began to fade. The shadows tried to follow it, stretching, clawing toward the center. But the glow slipped away before they could reach. One by one, they snapped back into place. Against the trees, against the rocks. Still, when the fire finally vanished, I was alone again. No warmth, no sound. Just the faint lingering shimmer in the air where the flames had been. I reached out, hesitant, and felt nothing. Not even cold, just emptiness. The darkness settled over me like a blanket. The forest stayed quiet, too quiet. I sat there until dawn, watching the ashes that refused to glow again. But sometimes when I close my eyes, I can still see it, that pale, living fire, breathing softly, waiting beneath the logs. And if I stare long enough, I swear the shadows start to move again. Not away this time, but closer. It shouldn't have been cold. Not in late autumn. Not here. But when I woke before dawn, the air felt wrong, still, heavy. My breath curled pale in the darkness, and the ground shimmered faintly beneath the trees. I thought it was dew at first, silvered grass catching the moonlight. But when I stepped closer, it cracked. Ice. A thin, glassy layer coating the trail. Perfectly smooth, stretching as far as I could see. I crouched down, touched it with my fingertips. The chill bit instantly, sharp enough to ache. It shouldn't have been there. The air was mild, the sky cloudless. No frost, no reason. And yet, the trail gleamed like a frozen river cut through the forest. That's when I noticed the shapes, footprints. Not on top, inside the ice. Perfectly preserved, trapped beneath the surface, each one deep, distinct, human. They led away from camp, pressed down as if someone had walked there hours before. And then, somehow, the ice had grown over them. I followed them with my eyes. They continued down the narrow path, curving between the trees, disappearing into the dark. I should have gone back, waited for sunrise, but curiosity has a pull that feels like gravity. So I stepped forward. The ice groaned softly under my boots. Every motion echoed, a whisper beneath me, stretching far into the distance. Fog drifted low across the path, curling around the trunks like pale smoke. Even the forest seemed to be holding its breath. Each step deepened the silence. Even the usual hum of insects was gone. No rustling, no birds. Just that faint, brittle crack beneath me. The prints inside the ice began to change. Some smaller, some longer, some not human. Their shape thinned out, elongated like something dragging its weight. Others looked doubled, as if two sets overlapped, but moved in the same direction. The air grew colder with each bend of the trail. My hands ached. The trees glittered faintly, their bark glazed in frost that hadn't been there moments before. And then, up ahead, a shimmer, like light rippling underwater. The trail curved sharply, and beyond it, something glowed faintly blue beneath the surface. I knelt, slowly. The prints had stopped. In their place was a shape, a long, uneven impression in the ice, like someone had lain down there. Arms out, head turned slightly. The ice was clearer here. I could see through it, veins of white running deep below, trapping faint movements, shadows that didn't belong. It looked like something shifting beneath. A slow pulse, breathing. I leaned closer. The chill pressed through my jacket. My reflection wavered on the surface, distorted, stretched. Then it blinked. Not me. Not quite. The face beneath the ice turned slightly. Its eyes opened, colorless, wide. My body froze before my mind caught up. For a heartbeat, I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. And then, the sound, soft, from beneath. A crack spreading outward, delicate. Like glass under pressure, the footprints inside the ice began to shift. One by one, they deepened, slowly sinking further down as if the ground below was swallowing them. The crack moved toward me. I stepped back, once, twice. The ice shuddered, a whispering ripple traveling down the path. I turned and ran. The fog followed, rolling after me like breath made solid. Every step sent new fractures across the trail, snapping through the ice like quiet thunder. By the time I reached camp, the ground was soft again. No frost, no trail of glass behind me. The forest had returned to normal. Almost. When the sun rose, I went back once just to see. The path was clear, but where the ice had been, the soil still glimmered faintly, as if something cold lingered below. And halfway down the trail, pressed deep into the earth, was a single, frozen footprint. Perfect, alone, it faced the camp. Not away, dawn was close. The faintest pale line had started to form behind the trees, spreading like breath through fog. I hadn't slept. The forest felt different now. Not hostile. Not calm either, just waiting. Every night before this, one had been filled with small sounds, wind brushing the branches, dry leaves shifting, some hidden creature moving in the dark. But now everything had stopped. Even the air seemed still. The silence wasn't peaceful. It pressed against me, heavy and listening. I packed slowly, each motion louder than it should have been. The scrape of a zipper, the rustle of canvas, tiny noises swallowed almost instantly. When I stepped away from camp, the frost still lingered along the trail. Thin veins of white curled through the dirt, catching what little light the sky offered. The trees leaned close overhead. I could see my breath again, thin wisps drifting upward before fading. It felt like the forest was breathing with me, slow, measured, in perfect rhythm. For a while, I thought I heard footsteps. Not close, not far. Just there, somewhere between the trees, matching my pace exactly. When I stopped, they stopped. The quiet deepened. Even the faint hum I'd grown used to, that low presence that always seemed to live beneath the silence, was gone. And yet, the weight of it remained. I reached the bend in the trail where the frost turned to soil. It should have felt familiar. But something was off. The path looked the same, but not the same. Colors drained, edges softer, like I was walking inside a memory that didn't fully belong to me. That's when I heard it. A whisper. So faint it might have been the breeze, except there was no wind. It came from behind me, then beside, then ahead. All at once, my name. I didn't move, didn't answer. Just stood there, listening. The voice was calm, not pleading, not cruel. Just certain. It said only one thing. You'll come back, not a question. A promise. The trees seemed to lean in closer. The air grew thicker, not colder, just slower. Every breath felt heavier than the last. I looked toward where the trail ended. Beyond it, the faint outline of the road waited, pale beneath the light of early morning. Normal. Safe. But between me and that quiet exit, the whisper returned. Not words this time. A low, steady hum. Almost human, almost. I turned. The forest behind me looked endless again. No end, no beginning. The same shapes I'd seen every night. The crooked tree, the hollow stump, the faint rise of fog. But they felt different now. As if they were watching me for the last time. I should have felt relieved to leave. Instead, I hesitated. There was something gentle in that whisper. Not malicious. Not kind either. Something in between. It felt like the woods were remembering me, the same way I would remember them. I took one step forward. The trail cracked faintly under my boot like thin ice giving way. Another whisper. Softer this time. Don't forget. The words brushed my ear like a breath that wasn't mine. I didn't look back again. I walked until the trees began to thin, until the first true light of dawn spilled through the branches. The road came into view, empty, silent, waiting. But even as I stepped onto it, I felt the forest behind me shift. Not visibly, not in any way I could prove, just sensed it, the weight of its gaze. And in that stillness, I realized something. The silence I'd heard before, the one that had crept in slowly, replacing every living sound, wasn't gone. It had followed, it lingered in my breath, in the faint ringing behind my ears, in the space between footsteps even now. Miles from that trail, I sometimes hear it, late at night. When everything is quiet enough to feel unreal, a single breath drifts through the room, soft, close, and somewhere just beyond hearing, a voice, familiar, unhurried, whispers again.